So I would now like to introduce Samantha Jones, who's the project officer for the Oswestry High Street Heritage Action Zone. And she's going to take a very practical look at the advantages of heritage-led regeneration. It's part of the programme of High Street Action Zones, which Historic England runs across England. Sam did her archaeology degree at Trinity College here in Carmarthen, but is now living and working in Oswestry just over the border. So thank you, Sam, and take it away.
Brilliant. Can we see that? Brilliant.
Yes,
thank you.
we can.
Brilliant.
See
Thanks very much. I just like to check before I I start going on. Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me along, Nell. As you say, 25 odd years ago, I came down to Carmarthen and spent 3 years there, and it was really lovely to see that video at the beginning, and see, you know, how things have changed, but equally how things are still the same. And I think that's kind of the fundamental thing, really, that our high streets are constantly evolving, and yet they have their roots firmly set in the past. And I think, you know, a lot of our speakers this morning have reiterated that, really. So yeah, so we've been doing a historic led regeneration scheme in Oswestry now for 2 years, and we've got 18 months left to go. So we're kind of at a good point to kind of assess our sort of strengths and challenges that go on through doing such a scheme. So we'll share some of those with you. So for those of you who've never been to Oswestry, we're right on the border up in sort of northeast Wales, so sort of located between sort of Wrexham, Chester, Shrewsbury, Llangollen, that kind of area. And we're a town that's very similar to Carmarthen in size, so we're sort of around 18,000. It's a market town, so we have a market 3 days a week, both inside and outside. And a few years ago in 2018, it was recognised really that there needed to be an injection of funding into the town centre to address a lot of the things that we've been talking about. So vacancy rates on shop floors, but equally on upper floors, and also the fact that you know, how we use our town centres have changed, and our sort of buying habits have changed as well. So we initially put in an application for a Heritage Action Zone funding in 2018, which we were unsuccessful with. And one of the reasons for that was that they didn't feel, Historic England didn't feel that our partnership working was strong enough. And I think that was probably one of the great things that came out of that application. So as a result, we set up the Future Oswestry Group. And that is a group that is made up of members of Shropshire Council, Oswestry Town Council, and the Oswestry Business Improvement District, so the BID. And it goes back to kind of what Ian said at the start about having that buy-in from all of the key stakeholders within the town centre. And I think that has been our ultimate success. I think we all work to basically bring you know, Oswestry back up, and a good place to live and work and visit. We then applied for a High Street Heritage Action Zone in 2019, and we were successful. So the project should have started in April 2020, but unfortunately a pandemic happened, which meant that there was a 6-month hiatus. So the project didn't actually get underway until October 2020. And we are one of 67 schemes throughout the country, and we are about a £2 million project. So we're actually quite small in comparison to many other towns across the country. And we have funding from Historic England, Oswestry Town Council and Shropshire Council. And really, I suppose the scheme came about because one, the Mary Porter's report, which said that our town centres were changing, Town centres very much used to be places that people gathered. For example, with the market town, Wednesday would be, so busy because all of the farmers and everything and their wives and the surrounding villages and towns would come to sell their animals. They would visit the market, they would catch up with friends, they would visit the pubs, all of those kind of things. And shopping kind of changed, kind of how Ben said, really. It became car dominant, and we had lots of out of town retail units setting up. And I think one massive positive of COVID is that we've kind of fallen back in love with our town centres in a way. We've kind of had to be forced to go and see what we could buy locally because we couldn't travel. And I think we've kind of discovered all of those wonderful things that the town has. And so we've got, the house scheme going on now, which has been really successful. And it's now part of kind of really that levelling up scheme that's we kind of hear probably quite daily. So what we've kind of done in the town centre is we have a capital grant scheme, and we have two strands to this. So one is our repurposing grant, and we have an intervention rate of 60%, and we have a cap on our grant schemes as well. So with repurposing, it's 25,000, and with Shopfront, it's 12,000. We are the lowest intervention rate of all of the schemes again. Most are 95%, and they don't have a cap either. So they're looking at really large projects. We've been really successful in our grants. We currently have 13 schemes, and we've committed around £300,000. And what we have done as a result is then, because we are targeting more properties rather than just doing a couple of big projects, I think cumulatively we have a much greater kind of a cumulative effect in the town centre. And therefore we've noticed a lot of much more beneficial work that's gone on. So this is 20 Church Street. Church Street within Oswestry is one of the main high streets, primarily in good condition, apart from 20 Church Street. And I think when you have one truly appalling high street shopfront, as we do there, it brings the whole of that street down. This is a listed building, grade 2 listed, and the previous owner of the building decided to rip out the shopfront and all of the internal walls on the ground floor, and then basically did a runner. And so it lay empty for a little while, and it went up for auction. And a local couple that already lived within the town decided to sell their property and purchase this property. They wanted to do the right thing for the building, and it goes back, I suppose, a bit to kind of what Helen was talking about. When you're looking at sort of significance and stuff like that. But I think when you've got an owner as well that has fallen in love with the building, then that makes things much easier in terms of kind of doing the work. So just a couple of quick internal shots. So they lived for about 3-4 years with very little inside. As you can see there, one of the steel columns that had to be made to ensure that the upper floors did not fall down. No shop front, lots of gaps there. It must have been freezing upstairs. And again, you can see it was just completely stripped back to nothing inside. We were able to award them a grant, and they've now fitted that out. They've made it DDA compliant, so it has ramped access and everything inside. It's currently nearing completion in terms of kind of being let. So then the final fit will occur from that. But externally, you can see that it's had quite a dramatic effect. And this was in a way, quite simple interventions. So just refurbishing the windows, replacing the lead work, a bit of paint work and decluttering. That's another thing that can have quite beneficial effect is getting rid of old wires and things like that from things that have changed over time. And then we were able to work on the shop front. We're really lucky in Oswestry that we've got 1960s images of all the shop fronts. So most of them are before kind of radical changes happen within the town centre. And initially they came in, they had planning permission for a very generic shop front because there was no, shop front left. But we were able to work with them to redesign the shop front. And come up with a design that reflected what was there before. And through working with them and the conservation team, I sit within the conservation team, we were able to give them all of that advice free of charge. So that's kind of one of the ways in which you can really help to get a good design that brings, well, adds to that area. Oswestry is a conservation area as well, just to bring that. Another one that we have is Blackgate. So this was again a long-term empty historic property. It's grade 2 listed again. It's part of an ex-pub, the Smithfield pub, which you can see on your right there, with the brick facade there. We've got we had bits of, a bar in there and bits of old sort of seating from the pub and everything like that going on inside. But we were able to work with this mother and son group who had worked kind of in the industrial estate, and they were looking to bring a tea room back into the town centre. And it's quite a kudos thing for the town centre, really. Adam Cleal, who is the baker there, was a semi-finalist in the Bake Off the Professionals, so it was really great to welcome a high-end business into the town centre as well. So on the left, you can see kind of how it was once kind of all of the sort of bar paraphernalia had gone. We were able to pay for all of the sort of kitchen fit out, really, so all of the hygiene walling of flooring that was required and stuff like that to bring them in. Also bringing services up to standard, so rewiring, plumbing and things like that, so that we reduce the risk of any fire going on. And as you can see, it's an open sort of catering area all the way through to the kitchen, so you can see Adam and his team working. And then this is the other side of the building, and obviously with the fitted units there, so everything is freestanding, nothing is mounted obviously to the walls and things like that. And they are there for 10 years, so they're there for the long term and are doing really successfully, which is fantastic. And then one Beatrice Street is just another one. This one is a non-designated heritage asset, but it brings so much to the conservation area. And it goes back to what Helen says about significance. This one was a hard fought battle with Historic England. It took us a year to get this one through the system. So that was a challenge, shall we say. But we fought very hard because Historic England were very concerned about the redevelopment of the upstairs and the potential modifications that had to be made through building regs, particularly after Grenfell, and the possibility of it taking away some of that historic significance. However, obviously we fought very hardly for this one because to us the significance of the property is its external facade and what it contributes to the conservation area. As you can see, it had a very attractive aluminium shop front, which was leaking and beyond repair. Upstairs was vacant, and yeah, we really a couple of internal pictures, wasn't really anything much of merit in there. And what they've been able to produce is a very, again, high-end quality product, which again is an apartment. And I think something that hasn't been mentioned yet that is really significant is that the best thing for any historic building is to have people living in it. It's people opening the windows, putting the heating on, all of those things that happens in a building on a day-to-day basis. There is nothing worse than an empty upper floor, as Helen alluded to, really. just kind of, being left to rack and ruin, it just causes such long-term issues. So that's now led to 4 young professionals. So we've got people in the town. That then leads on to Ben's comments really about having people in the town centre, using the facilities in the town, and also goes back to that pride of place from the first speaker that we had. By having people in there looking at the place, they become more protective of the place in which they live. They want to live in somewhere nice. And then just to go to the front and to realise kind of why the building interior was quite bland is that it was the former butcher's, and typically of butchers, the money is put on the shop front, out of doors really, not on in the interior. However, one sort of cautionary note, I suppose, whenever you're doing any redevelopment scheme is that we have to sort of be careful not to create a pastiche of what was there, and in terms of like taking a snapshot of a high street at a certain time and trying to recreate that. As I said, our high streets are constantly evolving and constantly changing, and our shopping habits have changed as well. This shop will never be a butcher's again, and therefore we needed to, have some degree of flexibility about what we restored and put back there, I suppose, to reflect those habits that we have today. The shop is currently a consortium of local kind of craftspeople's wares really, so it requires a big shop front to display. It needs a shop front rather than a much smaller windows and things like that. So this is the shop front that we've put in. It has elements of the original shop front there, but what it's created is a vibrant space that, as you can see, displays what's on in the shop, draws people in through the door, and that's what we need to be doing. 17 Cross Street is something that's undergoing radical change at the moment. So this is how we can help other people as well. It's not just about businesses and things like that. Designs in Mind is a community interest company that works with adults with mental health issues. They currently occupy the top 2 floors. However, there are issues in terms of disability access. You have to go down a very narrow passageway on that left-hand side, turn in a 90 degrees and then another 90 degree to get into a very small lift to get upstairs. So they were really looking at how can they make their offer to those people easier, more accessible, but equally how could they promote themselves and to break down the stigma that is attached with mental health issues. So in this case, we've funded them to repurpose the downstairs, but we've 100% funded this shop front. So that's a match of Historic England and Oswestry Town Council money. We don't have any historic images of this shop front. Sadly, the street was really narrow, so it made sort of historic Victorian images really difficult. And by the 1960s, we had that horrible shop front that we had before that was eating up so much of the internal space. So what we've done again with the conservation officer and with their architect is to look at similar buildings. So you can just see Bernardo's on the right hand side. We've taken that design there and replicated it on the pilasters there. We've got a nice interned doorway now, and the fascia sadly is that has to be that deep due to the steel work and stuff that's there, but it's 100% improvement on what was there internally. Sorry, not internally, before. And I think what's been really interesting is to see the change that's happening with the town centre. So this is Coral a few doors up that has actually started to paint their shop front and do repairs to their fascia. They're doing this off their own back. So it's kind of nice to see. This is what you always want with a project, to carry out some intervention work, which then has other a cumulative effect going on with people up in their game to realise that they have to bring their shops to a better standard. And then what we've done in vacant shops, Oswestry has a very low vacancy rate. We've only probably got about half a dozen shops vacant within the town centre. But instead of seeing it as a vacant shop, what we've done is a very cheap intervention rate. So for a few £100s, we've got some interpretation, vinyls on the shop front. It means that people don't see it as a vacant shop as they're walking past. And then it's quick and easy for the new owners, whenever they do come in, just to rip that off once they're ready to open. And then really just the other big thing that we've done as part of the project is our public realm project. And here we concentrated on alleyways. So we've heard on a couple of other talks about kind of how these old linkages points are kind of really key. This is Herbie Roberts Way. As you can see, it's really poor. It's the paving is not to the grade that needs to be to take vehicular access. There's a very small car park for businesses on that right hand side by the red wheelie bin, and then further up we've got businesses as well. We've got a cafe, nail bar and things like that. So quite often people would either walk past these, they don't realize they can walk up, they might think that it's just for a car park and things like that. So we really wanted to upgrade these and make them destination places in themselves. So what we've done is upgraded things like the paving there. So we've taken up the sort of degraded tarmac, and then we've replaced it with some high quality paving there. As you can see, we've done the same thing down on that lower section. And what we've been able to do is to work with businesses who've been really supportive. So with the works here, we've moved the wall back, which means that now you have a much better vista going up. You can see that there's businesses. It looks much more inviting and welcoming. We've put planters. We're now seeing that actually the community are adding planters as well in other areas and putting plants in the planters as well. So it's really nice to see that they're adopting things as well. And we're creating art, sort of destination points, I suppose. So at each sort of entrance way to the alleyways, there will be something that sort of announces that you are somewhere. And at this point, we're going to have a clock which has iconography of St. Oswald on it. Kyglass Park was an alleyway. So on the left-hand side of the image there, that's a Grade 2 listed pub. On the right-hand side, not so nice pub, a Wetherspoons. But this was a link through to the park, and we do a lot of consultations part of our project, and something that came out quite a lot was that people didn't know that they could walk that way down to the park. And things like the benches, they said, well, I wouldn't want to sit here and while away the time. It's it's not a nice place to stop. So what we've done is radically transformed that alleyway and created, pulled the park down into the town centre and created a real welcome through. So we've got wisteria and ivy there that will climb up over that archway and will hide a lot, hopefully, of that Wetherspoons architecture there. We've repainted and stuffed the pub, and instead we've created a really vibrant place that actually people now want to sit and look at. And then I can't remember whose talk it was, but somebody mentioned about kind of naming and kind of bringing back those things that are forgotten. So one of the alleyways that we've worked on is Star Passage. This alleyway did not have a name before. It was totally lost. But what we've been able to do with a group of volunteers who are working through archive records for us was find that it was actually called Star Passage historically, and that was because of the Star Inn pub that used to be at one end. And I think it's really important about putting, those names back in and telling people about those names. So we have these small interpretation panels that tell people just a, very small snippet of history and making those connections again. And that's kind of it, really. An Oswestry and a whistle-stop tour, but diolch am gwrando. So thank you for listening. And I don't know, Nell, if we've got any time for questions or if we're leaving them to the end.